What's going on, YouTube? I thought that for this video I would do something a little bit different since I recently hit 100 subscribers and thought, hey, maybe I should do something to celebrate. Okay, but if you're here for my series on chess opening theory, don't click away just yet, as this video is going to be part of that series, even though it's going to be a little bit different, a little bit interesting. And, I also felt that since I showed a game where I won with the French defense, I should also show a game where I lost to the French defense. And so I thought, hey, I actually have this game. This is actually a pretty interesting game. It's actually very relevant to the sideline that is coming up. In terms of, one of the things you might see, one of the practical aspects of it. So I guess I should first start by just, talking about the opening a little. So the opening was the French defense, which occurs after the moves e4, e6, d4, d5, and this was a Winawer variation with knight c3, bishop to b4, and so the next sideline that we're going to be looking at, in fact, I think this is the final move for sideline, is e takes d5. And here, this is actually a very topical sideline. It is what Grandmaster Hare Krishna covers in his course called the French Toast. Basically a course on Chessable about how to destroy the French defense. And Grandmaster Giri speaks fairly highly of this course. However, this game is going to be about a very important question that you should, ask yourself before you start getting worried about, this line, the French Toast. And that question is my opponent actually trying, Hare Krishna's ideas, or are they just doing something else? So after white plays e takes d5 here, the best move for black is to take back with the pawn. Black can try taking back with the queen, but that really isn't any good. Basically, if we turn on the engine just really already considers white to have a very significant advantage here. Basically, the problem with taking back with the queen is very similar to a certain other very relevant variation you might remember, which is that this light square bishop still stays stuck behind the pawns. It has trouble getting into the game, and white's developments is fairly straightforward, whereas, black, it might have to actually waste some time moving this queen again because it might get attacked. So I do not recommend queen takes d5, as with the other certain variation, even though this might seem a bit boring or unimaginative. Just take back with the pawn, free up this bishop, make sure it's a happy bishop. And then a very common move that white will play here is bishop to d3. And the most common move for black is knight to c6, which is a fine move. It's a decent move. But Grandmaster Giri likes knight to f6, and I personally like knight to f6 for a certain reason. And here, the most challenging moves that you have to worry about are knight to e2 and pawn to a3. I do plan to put out videos that cover these moves, but for this game, for this video, I'm going to be looking at what if white tries knight f3, or, as happened in the game, what if white plays bishop to g5 first, and then so here in this particular game, black played pawn to c6, which is a very decent move. Black should try to keep some imbalances on the board, or black has more or less equalized, or is going to equalize, and should try to go for dynamic equality, try to go for, the fun kind of equality where, there are winning chances for both sides and where the more skilled player will win. So white now played knight to f3. This is, very common move, very straightforward. And here in this position, black made a bit of an inaccuracy with move bishop to g4. This move is not so good here. here, because white actually has the possibility of now playing queen to e2 check, which would kind of discoordinate black a little bit. Like, the best move for black now would be to just retreat the bishop to block the check, but that's a bit silly. That's not a fun move to make because you already moved your bishop, and, you know, similar reason with the other bishop. If you bring that guy back, that's also not so fun. Like, if black tries the most intuitive move, which is queen to e7, then white can actually damage the structure here with bishop takes f6. And if black takes the queen, white can actually take back with the king and be ready to take back the knight on f3 with their king. And also, even though white has lost castling rights, white can play rook e1 and then maybe king to f1 if they want, you know, kind of castle by hand and bring the rook to the e file in one go. And it might look like, oh, maybe black can go for bishop takes c3, but the problem is after bishop takes g2, bishop takes b2, bishop takes h8, bishop takes a1, white can take the bishop, but black cannot. So, you know, that unfortunately does not work out so well. So that is why back in this position here, it's actually more accurate for black to castle. Like, it's better for black to castle here, and if white tries playing pawn to h3 to stop the bishop from going to g4, then black has rook to e8 check, and now it's white who's going to get a little bit discoordinated. So basically, the most accurate move order is for black to castle, white to castle, and then black play bishop to g4. But that's not quite what happened in the game. Instead, we have bishop to g4, white castled, missing the queen e2 resource, and black castled. And we now have a fairly equal position, but dynamically equal, still fairly interesting. So before continuing, I thought that I should, you know, just introduce the players really quick. So with the white pieces, we have... Ugh! That is an ugly photo. Oh my, that is a face that only a mother could love. I think I've seen that name somewhere in the past, but I could definitely see why I didn't include a picture. Oh my lord, white is just ugly. Ugh. Ugh. Yeah, white is some nobody. I don't think I've ever heard of white before. You know, white's just some random guy. And let's see. With the black pieces, we have Aman Hambleton, who you might know as one of the Chessbrahs. He is currently a grandmaster. In the text here, I'm not putting the GM title because he was not a grandmaster at this point in time. And he did not play like a grandmaster this game. Like, he played well for his rating. But basically, if I put the GM title, people might get on his case and be like, hey, why did you not play very grandmasterly here? And he'd be like, give me a break, I wasn't even 12. You know, stuff like that. And let's see, well, I don't know anything about white, but I do know a few things about black. Okay, let's see. So black went to Woburn Collegiate High School. And let's see, in his on his official website, he mentions that there he regularly sparred with a strong player. That strong player is not myself. That strong player is International Master GM Thavandiran, who at the time was not an IM. You know, so although he did become a FIDE master in high school, similar to how, you know, black also became a FIDE master in high school. No, I did not go to Woburn. I went to Victoria Park Collegiate, and unfortunately there I did not really have any players who I could spar with. Like, that's a very important thing in chess, is to just have some, you know, have some people who you can play games with on a very regular basis, you know, just practice with, you know, play for fun. Like, I unfortunately did not have that opportunity. Like, there were, you know, a few players at my high school who were stronger than myself. In fact, they were only like 100 or 200 points stronger than myself in terms of rating. But the problem was that they basically refused to play any friendly games, and they were actually kind of assholes. Like, I will not mince words there. Like, they would do things like, if they were losing in a slow game, game, they would just let their time run out. Like that's something that if you tried that on Lichess or chess.com, like even if you were playing a blitz game, you would get banned. Like even if just temporarily, like that's a very big no-no. And doing that in a slow game, you know, when the time control is like game in 90 is just blech. So yeah, yeah. So Black would very regularly do very well in the high school league. In fact, let's see. I believe on Black's official website they mention even finishing first in the high school team championship for the entire province of Ontario. And let's see. I myself, like my own high school, we actually did fairly well. I think there was a time when we finished second or something like that, like second or third. Like Black's team was the one that finished first, of course. First, and let's see, what else do I know? Oh, yeah, unfortunately, I don't know anything about White. In fact, to be completely dishonest, I have never ever met White in my life. And let's see. Oh yeah, Black very regularly played at the Scarborough Chess Club, which is a very weird thing for me to know. It's almost as if I was there myself. Yeah. So anyway, back to the game. Oh, and for the record, like from what I don't know Black that well, but from what I saw, Black generally was a very good sport. Always exuded very good sportsmanship. I think he still continues that to this day. And as far as Chessbrahs content goes, I personally would recommend Black's video on the Jerome Gambit. That's a really funny one, as well as their series on building habits, which is a series about improving at chess by learning, very good positional principles, like learning very good habits. Like he basically shows how it's possible to win games even without advanced tactics if you have, good positional understanding and good habits, all that kind of stuff. And oh yeah, this particular game was played at the Canadian Youth Chess Championship, also known as the CYCC, like people generally call it that for short. Like that's one of the biggest chess tournaments in Canada. The other big one would be the Canadian Open Chess Championship, which is kind of not just for the youth, but it's for everybody. And for whatever reason, they very often have it take place at about the same time as the CYCC, so that's why you often won't see kids playing in the Canadian Open, even though there's no real rule against it. I always found that to be kind of weird, and I'm probably not going to be able to find that much information about this particular iteration of the event, but hopefully I'll at the very least, I should be able to find information about the event in general, because it's a very big event, still played to this day. And with all that out of the way, now back to the game. So, let's see. Let's see, where was I here? Oh yeah, I was talking about how with this line, the very first thing to concern yourself with when you see these moves, e4, e6, d4, d5, knight c3, bishop b4, e takes d5, and might as well throw in e takes d5. The very first question you should ask yourself when you see this, even though this is a very, topical line, and even though it's actually a decent sideline for White to be playing, the very first thing to figure out as Black is White actually playing theory, or is White actually playing the exchange variation, but with knight c3 and bishop b4 thrown in? Because if it's the latter, then if White is playing weird moves that don't seem to be theory, then you know that White is just kind of actually being quite timid and is trying to go for something, fairly drawish, or at the very least is trying to bail out of the Winawer. And somehow I know that in this case, that even though White is not a very drawish player, they kind of saw the Winawer and went, ah! And just immediately bailed out. Yeah, somehow I know that's what White was thinking. It's kind of weird. And so anyway, if in this position here, after bishop d3, knight f6, all that stuff. If white isn't playing one of the challenging moves, which I'm going to be covering in later videos, if white's not doing that, then white might be going for a standard exchange variation, because bishop to d3 is a very, very common move in the exchange. Very common move to watch out for. And now if we just go back to the game, so once again, bishop g5, c6 is a nice move. You want to just keep some imbalances. Knight f3 kind of is a bit of a tell. That kind of informs you that, yeah, maybe white is just playing a standard exchange as opposed to playing this new trendy French toast stuff. Up and here, black should, of course, castle before playing bishop to g4, but we have bishop to g4. White did not see queen e2 check. White just went castles. We have castles. Now we are back in the game. White now plays pawn to a3 because this bishop is kind of annoying over here. I think black can take on c3, but in this particular game, black did not want to. Black did not seem all that interested in it and just moved the bishop back to d6. There can be practical reasons why. Like, basically, if you're facing a lower-rated opponent, you might want to keep more pieces on the board because there are more winning chances when there are more pieces. White now played pawn to h3, questioning the bishop. The bishop dropped back to h5, kind of answering the question. White kind of got a little bit fancy here with the move bishop to f5, which isn't a bad move, but it is a little weird. It is a little silly, because black just plays bishop to g6 now, and basically says, okay, you moved your bishop a whole bunch of times. I'm just gonna, trade my own bishop away. And yeah, like, you'll kind of lose a bit of your first move advantage as white because, you've kind of just been wasting some time here. So white takes, damaging black's pawn structure. Black took back with the h-pawn. I think taking with the f-pawn is also interesting just because if you take with the h-pawn, there is the issue that you no longer have access to the move pawn to h6. Whereas if you take with the f-pawn, you do open up this file for the rook. And not only that, but normally when you move the f-pawn, like have the f-pawn leave f7, you have to worry about this diagonal. But black actually has that diagonal more or less under control thanks to these pawns in the center. Although I should make sure that I'm not misleading anyone. What does the engine think of this? Yeah, f takes is fine. Like the engine does seem to prefer h takes, but I think f takes is also, worthy of consideration. Also an interesting choice. Anyway, black took back with the h-pawn. When in doubt, take towards the center. Like, taking with the h-pawn is not bad by any means. White played knight to e5. White is trying to play actively and aggressively. He putting the knight on a strong square. And, I could kind of understand and why white would do that. Somehow I know white's playing style. Black plays rook to e8, improving their rook, putting it on the open file. Rooks belong on open files, as they say. White's like, hey, that's a good idea, and plays rook e1. Black plays knight bd7. Like, basically, this knight on b8 is actually kind of a problem piece for black at the moment, since it doesn't really have that many good squares to go to. Like, the pawn is occupying c6, and if the knight goes to a6, well, where's it going next? Because these two squares are covered by white's pawns. So black's like, yeah, okay, I think I will trade my knights. This knight's not very good, whereas this knight on e5, it's kind of annoying. I think I'll try to get rid of it. And now white, starts going a little bit wrong here. Like, the move pawn to f4 was a bit premature. Or, like, it's a little bit weakening. White should have probably, prepared this move first or done something else. Like, the problem that white was faced with is that, black was threatening to win a pawn over here due to these three attackers on this knight that's only defended twice. Nice, but f4 is very severely weakening. The best move, according to the engine, would have just been knight takes d7, and after queen takes d7, black's not too worried about the doubled pawns over here if bishop takes knight, because after pawn takes, black could play king g7 and just have a very safe king. Anyway, we might have queen d3, bishop c7, queen f3, threatening the pawn, knight h7. And this is an interesting position, but this is not what happened in the game. Instead, what happened in the game was white got a bit crazy, as they usually do, and played pawn to f4. And if you want, you can pause the video and try to figure out what did black now do. There's a very good move for black in this position, which was played in the game. I will reveal the answer in 3, 2, 1. So the move that black now played was queen to b6. And the point is that it both hits the b2 pawn, and it also hits, it also puts the queen on this vulnerable diagonal. And basically, this pawn over here no longer protects the knight on e5. And so in this position here, best move for white to play is just to play knight to a4, kind of get the queen away from here and also defend this pawn. If black tries a move like queen to a5, for example, then white could just go knight c3, and then maybe black should play queen to c7, something like that. But that's not what happened in the game. And here, of course, if white plays king to h1 just to break the pin, then black could just gobble up the pawn on b2. White doesn't have time to play rook b1 because the queen is threatening the knight, and the queen will be able to escape, maybe to b5 or b6, and then just save the pawn on b7. Don't allow the rook to take it. So white in this position played queen d2, which is not a good move. Somehow I know why white played this move. The idea is that basically if black plays queen takes b2, then white has rook b1. And even though black might be able to win the pawn on a3, white getting the rook on b7, would be some decent compensation. It would kind of shatter black's pawn structure, put the rook on a very active square, and, the pawn on c6 would be under attack, and also the queen would be off this diagonal, so this pawn would be able to give support to, e5. But black, of course, did not take on b2. Black instead took on e5. With knight takes e5, white took back with the pawn, f takes e5. And now, got a very good question for you. What is the best way for black to now take on e5? It actually does matter. So, this is a very good question to think about. Should black play bishop takes e5 or rook takes e5? This is an important decision. I will reveal the answer in 3, 2, 1. So, in the game, black played bishop takes e5, which is the wrong answer. It's actually better for black to play rook takes e5, and the reason why is because it would be, threatening to play rook takes here with check, basically get this rook out of the way, and, give black enough time to, avoid any stuff with, this pawn becoming unpinned and hitting the rook over here. So the game might continue, like knight a4, the idea being to hit the queen, force it away, but black is in time with rook takes e1 check. After rook takes e1, black could go queen b5, keep the queen active. And if white goes bishop takes f6, g takes f6, yeah, this is a little bit damaged, but the thing is that we're going into a major piece endgame, and king safety is very, very important in such endgames. Black could actually hide their king on g7. Like if white goes pawn to b3, which is what the engine suggests, black can go king to g7 just to safeguard this square, for example. Maybe black can even use the h-file at some point if it ever becomes useful. And then maybe, stuff like queen f2, bishop takes a3, rook f1, bishop e7, just ganging up on the f-pawn here. c5. This would be an interesting position, but this is not what happened in the game. Like, black just is doing very well here because black is just eating pawns, and black actually has a safer king than white at the moment, and better control of the center with this, nice, well-supported pawn on d5 and things like that. Black basically just needs to get their rook out, get their rook into the game, or maybe just start pushing the pawn, like pushing the a-pawn, get the rook into the game that way. But this is not what happened in the game. Instead, in the game, Black actually took back the wrong way. Black played bishop takes e5, and now a very cool idea by white. I'm actually very surprised that white found this idea. Maybe white somehow knew about Ben Feingold and his rule to always sacrifice the exchange. Rook takes e5, rook takes e5. But it's not a true sacrifice of the exchange, of course, because white is going to get it back. White plays knight to a4, and now this queen has to go somewhere. It's under attack, and black does not have time to like move their rook away. So this rook is going to be lost. So black now plays queen to b5. White plays d takes e5. Now this knight is under attack, so if black plays queen takes a4, white will just take the knight and actually be up a minor piece, be up a bishop. So that's why knight e4 is the best move. White now plays queen b4. A very cool idea, actually. White definitely deserves some credit for this idea, because after queen takes b4, pawn takes b4, knight takes g5, white now goes knight to b6, attacking the rook. If the pawn takes the knight, well, thanks to the open A file, the rook would be able to take the rook. The rooks would see each other. So black counterattacks the pawn over here, and white's rook arrives on the 7th rank. And, oh, this is very interesting. I thought white was losing this game. According to the engine, this is actually an equal position. That's kind of cool. Anyway, rook takes a7, rook takes e5, king f1, stopping the rook from coming to the 7th rank itself. Oh, good move. Also improving the position of the king a little. Like, activating your king in the endgame is pretty important. We have rook e4, hitting the pawn on b4. Pawn to c3, defending it. Pawn to d4. And now rook takes b7. There was no real good way to save the pawn on b7, like maybe moving the rook back and being passive, but generally in rook endgames, especially if you're playing for a win, you want, like, piece activity is very important. Like, if you're just very passive, then eventually your opponent might actually overwhelm you with raw aggression, stuff like that. Anyway, knight e6. We have knight a4, getting ready to reroute. Oh, also adding some support to c3 over here. We have pawn to f5, rook to d7. Like, while it is true that, this rook is cutting off the king from being able to touch, this pawn, white is able to hit the pawn from behind. So pushing the pawn forward to d3 would actually be very risky and would probably just result in the pawn being lost. We have king to f8, knight to b6, rerouting the knight, very cool stuff. King to e8, king to f2, pawn to g5, rook to d6, hitting the pawn on c6. It's, all that kind of good stuff. King to e7, knight to c8, check. And let's see. What is anything I wanted to say here? Now, king to f6. White manages to take the pawn on c6. And in this position, black now played the move king to e5, and hey, wait a minute. What's going on? I thought I said that I lost this game. And why is the engine saying that white has a winning position? Alright, if you want, you can pause the video and try to figure out how white should go about the endgame here, as this is actually kind of cool. Actually, a pretty cool little position. Like, I don't blame white for missing this. This says, even to this day, white is not that great of an endgame player. White needs to work on their endgames. White has been working on their endgames. And so, basically, part of the idea, like, part of the reason why king to e5 is a little bit wrong, is a little bit premature, is because what white wants to do is white wants to make sure that their king can deal with the d-pawn over here, because this pawn might try running down the board. The problem that it's running into at the moment is that the rook is stopping the king from getting any closer. So the reason why king to e5 is bad is because white can now play knight to d6 and hit the rook. The rook can no longer really go to the e3 square because knights to c4, would be check. Uh, Also, I guess if it went there, like pawn would take over here, but like pawn might be able to take like this, although the rook would probably head to b3 and just start killing these pawns, and then maybe this knight can kill stuff like that. Like this king would be able to deal with this pawn, things of that nature. But basically, after the knight comes to d6, it's if black tries like king to d5, it looks like, looks like the rook and knight are kind of forked. I could just counterattack and things like that. Maybe even have some funny ideas of sacrificing the exchange with like, knight takes, pawn takes, and have two connected passers. Maybe fun stuff like that. But white can be like, nah, let's not worry about, complicating stuff. Let's just push my b pawn. And how's your king gonna touch it? How's your king gonna get close to it? And it's like, oh snap, my rook's still under attack. Gotta play rook f4 check. White can slide their king here and be able to deal with the d pawn now. And basically, there's nothing better to do according to the engine than just trade. But this position just looks awesome for white. Like white will be threatening to push this guy with check and then just have these two connected passers take over the game. And basically, so that's why king d5 doesn't work. And if rook f4 check, then, similar stuff. King can slide over here. Basically, white wants to make sure that they can deal with this far advanced pawn on if it ever becomes a passer, since it's kind of the biggest problem for white to deal with at the moment. If knight d8, then throw in this check to make sure that black doesn't win the knight if the rook moves away. King d5, give this check, force the king back again. If king e6, rook c8, harass the knight a little. Well, if king e7, now this is very complicated stuff. I'm probably not even doing this line justice. But yeah, white actually had a winning position if they were good at endgames, but no, white is not good at endgames. Anyway, back in this position, white did not see any of that stuff. White instead just played rook d6, trying to deal with this d-pawn by getting behind it this way, but this is not correct. We have d takes c3, b takes c3, and black now plays rook c4, hitting both this knight and this pawn. Not only that, but the rook, the knight can't move away. So white is basically blundered by playing rook d6. White's knight is kind of overworked. It can't move away. So white decides to sacrifice the knight, but you might notice the engine evaluation. White hasn't actually quite blundered just yet. So if you want, you can pause the video and try to find an interesting resource that white might have here. It's actually a very cool idea. So I will reveal the moves in 3, 2, 1. So in this position, even though it looks like white has messed up and is going to lose the game, white could actually play rook d5 check. And basically, if black's king takes the rook, white would play knight b6 check, and black's king can't move to a square where it would be defending the rook. Black would have to move their king away, and then white can take the rook. So for example, just like this, the king can't go here or here. Here, so as a result, after rook d5 check, it's better for black to move their king. Like basically, in this position, I haven't actually looked at this with the engine, but I can already tell that if the king, moves away and white takes this rook, white is essentially going to be playing for 2 results because, basically white's the only one with winning chances, because even if white somehow lost their connected passers on the queen side over here, white could probably actually trade away 2 pawns for 2 pawns over here somehow, and then sacrifice their knight for black's remaining pawn. Knight endgames can get very complicated. They can get very messy. There probably would still be a very interesting game to play, but basically, white would be doing very well here. I should just, yeah, the engine agrees. Engine's like, yeah, white wins in this particular case. So that's why taking the rook is actually very bad. Black should instead move their king somewhere. And basically, the best move is king to e4, but if king to e4, white can now free their rook by playing rook to d6. And the best move for black, apparently, is to just go back and repeat moves. That would be, pretty funny. And another thing to pay attention to is the fact that if the king instead goes to, like, f6 or f4, then white might be able to still, stay in the game, or maybe even draw the game by, like, playing knight to d6, or maybe even sack the rook on f5 first, although I think that's a little bit risky. But basically play knight d6 and just have the rook take this pawn, and then black would just have these doubled pawns, and white would not be losing any material. White would, like, maybe white loses these pawns, but white would not be losing their knight, as happened in the game. So in this position, white actually did have a very cool resource in the form of rook d5 check, but white did not find it. White played rook d3 and lost their knight, gave up their knight, basically trying to use these connected pawns to win the game. So white plays pawn to b5, rook c5, pawn to c4, or rook takes c4, rook b3, knight d4, rook b1, rook b1. What the heck is that move? Rook c7, pawn to b6. Rook slides in front of the pawn, stops it from making any more progress, and now black's just going to go eat the pawn. King to e3, knight to e6, rook to b5 check, king to f6. King stays and defends these guys over here, because black is still going to need a pawn to win the game. Even like rook and knight versus rook with no pawns on the board is very difficult to convert. Very, very difficult. Not always even possible. So we have g4, g6, king d3, knight f8, king c4, and sadly white was not in time to save their pawn. Black plays knight d7, and it was in this position that white now resigned the game. So I hope that you enjoyed this game, even like I know I did. And like even though I lost, this was still a very cool game, and I'm actually quite happy that it's actually kind of relevant for the series on chess opening theory. I think I will include this in the series because basically if your opponent plays the e takes d5 sideline, it's very important to check. Are they actually playing something theoretical, or are they just bailing out? So I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you everyone for the 100 subscriptions in total. And until next time, bye for now.